The Last Clue is a production of Smith Media Team, LLC. Listener discretion is advised, mostly because of me. We're back with The Last Clue, episode 19. And we would like to thank all of our new listeners from podcast.today. That's a daily newsletter that helps thousands of listeners discover the best new podcasts. And we were very thankful and fortunate to be featured in one of their daily episodes for our podcast called The Theory That May Solve the Missy Beavers Murder.
Thank you, guys.
We really do appreciate it.
We really do.
We saw the uptick in our numbers, and we truly do appreciate podcast.today. Go check them out. Find your favorite podcast, just like The Last Clue, and subscribe. And subscribe to our subscriber only content.
So exciting. We'll get a little unhinged there.
We'll definitely have some content available on this podcast. Episode 19, segment 1, Cold Fire, the Yogurt Shop Murders. This was a Friday night, a fire, and 4 girls who never came home in Austin, Texas.
Yeah. Another one of my homes, and if you've ever been part of a military lifestyle, you understand what I'm saying when I say one of my homes. This included 4 teenage girls, victims of a murder, initially thought to be an arson, but it was an arson to cover up the murders. They were killed execution style. We have Jennifer and Sarah Harbison, sisters. Jennifer was 17, Sarah 15. Eliza Thomas, age 17, and friend Amy Ayers, age 13.
And Jennifer and Eliza were working at, I can't believe it's yogurt, in Austin, Texas. Sarah Harbison and her friend Amy Ayers were there at the end of the shift to hang out with their sisters and friends, get a ride home.
Catch a ride home.
It was a normal December night in Austin until it wasn't.
Yeah, Friday night, just girls hanging out, trying to, get done with work, go home. They were found bound. Sarah was sexually assaulted. They were all shot execution style and burned inside of the yogurt shop. Like I said, an arson to cover up the murders.
And the reason we decided to cover this case is that HBO has announced a 4-part docuseries by Margaret Brown called The Yogurt Shop Murders. It will premiere August 3rd on HBO and stream on Max. And it is going to explore evidence, police interviews, and fresh investigative angles, and hopefully shed some new light. So we're really hoping for a lot from the Yogurt Shop Murders docuseries from our friends at HBO and Max.
Yeah, so we're over 30 years into this case, and there are still no definitive answers for the community, the families, anybody there. And this one was such a bizarre one, with it being an arson set to cover up murders of these 4 teenage girls that never got to see any part of life.
And as the ashes settled on the yogurt shop, suspicions rose. There were over 50 suspects initially reviewed in this case. And the focus narrowed down to 4 teenagers: Michael Scott, Robert Springsteen, Maurice Pierce, and Forrest Wellborn.
Yes, and that was such a narrow focus. I mean, I know they spoke about 50 suspects, and that's just what is covered here. We know there were hundreds, but they were focused on these four kids. It just right off the bat, I believe it was just within a week of the murders, since one of them was found with a gun at the local mall. And I don't feel like the focus ever really shifted from them.
I know exactly why the focus fell on those four kids. And it's something that you have said you're going to discuss in our premium subscriber only content. And it's something that is sitting right there. And I'm not saying that Austin PD hasn't considered this. I'm saying that I have never heard them speak about this. When you said it, it was just like a ton of bricks hit me. So again, our subscriber only content, you're going to want to hear her thoughts on why they focused on those four boys at the start.
Yeah. Uh, I get a little passionate about things like this, especially when there's kids involved, because it's just so nonsensical. And now we have families that have been waiting over 30 years for answers for these girls. And I'm hoping that us talking about it, you guys listening to it, you guys sharing it, and our friends at HBO Max now doing this documentary on it are going to help shed some light on this, because the DNA that they had in this case basically convicted and exonerated the four suspects that they honed in on.
So Austin PD, they did have DNA from the scene. It was very deteriorated, but when you watch some of the documentaries, especially the 48 hours, you can see that Austin PD was anxious to have a suspect or suspects in custody. And eventually, Michael Scott and Robert Springsteen did confess to the murders, but it was later ruled that it was coerced out of them, and you can clearly see it in the interview footage.
Yeah.
That again, Robert Springsteen was arrested with the 22 caliber pistol, and at one point during the interview, the police officer detective interviewing him basically screams at him and said, you did this. How did you do it? And I'm paraphrasing, of course.
Sure.
But takes the 22 caliber pistol and puts it to the back of the head of Robert Springsteen. At that point, I would have confessed to the murder.
Sure. And I mean, if you are 15 to 17 years old and you're caught with a gun and you're trying to, get out of this charge, and your brain's not fully developed, aren't you going to basically say whatever the cops tell you to say? But my thoughts, premium content, I'll go further into that. I don't want to get too ahead of ourselves right here, right now. We want to focus on these girls.
So justice came quickly, but not cleanly.
No.
Robert Springsteen was convicted and sentenced to death in 2001. Michael Scott was convicted a year later in 2002, and he was sentenced to life in prison. But in 2006, both of the convictions were overturned due to the lack of cross-examination rights.
So their constitutional rights were, words hard.
Violated.
Thank you.
So they considered the constitutional rights of these two kids.
Right.
Now, again, I do believe that they were coerced into these statements, and you will go into that more in our subscriber-only content. However, I don't agree with the constitutional rights necessarily taking precedent over a case when you've got four girls who lost their human rights when
all of their rights,
when whomever decided to take their lives, rape one of them, bound them, and then light the building on fire.
Right.
They took every right that those girls had. They took everything away from them. They took everything away from their families. Their moms and dads don't get to see them graduate. They don't get to see them get married, have kids and grandkids, travel the world. They don't get to see any of that.
None.
Because someone or some some bodies decided that they were going to take advantage of 4 girls.
In a robbery gone wrong for what? How much back then in that day?
It
500 bucks.
less than $500 because the big drop had been dropped into the floor safe. They couldn't get to it, so they got less than $500 and took 4 lives of 4 girls, 4 children.
If you want to get really, really angry about this, you want to break it down even more mathematically, and I'm not even going to do new math. You're talking $125 per life.
So when
Ridiculous. For girls to be shot in the back of the head, execution style.
so we have a deteriorated DNA, but the prime suspects are ruled out. So what remains? Who does the unidentified male DNA belong to? And again, before this documentary comes out, if you go back and watch the 48 hours on this case, one of the defense attorneys says, I know who did it, I just don't know his name. They have enough of a profile because at first the profile only had
16 markers?
somewhere around there. They revisited it and brought in a few more, maybe brought that number up to around 25. It was less than 30.
Definitely less than 30. And they usually, I think they said they run 120 or more, 120 markers or more.
Yeah, with 13 or 25 markers at that time period, I could have been considered a suspect because I wasn't that far from Austin. You're talking about such deteriorated DNA that they had hundreds of thousands of
Yes.
suspects. It literally could have been a majority of males in that area, and I will just say that they have
Sure.
identified that it's male DNA because they did not have the female DNA. They
Right.
only had the male DNA. They did not get the female part of the DNA out.
Right. So it'll be interesting to see if there's enough left to test with any of the new sciences and DNA capabilities that have come out, especially with this new documentary coming out with HBO on August 3rd.
And you have to ask the question, since
August
they
3rd?
rushed to judgment on the 4 boys, allegedly, since they rushed to judgment, were there other suspects that were overlooked? Did that rush to judgment on these 4 young men, whether they had something to do with it or not, did they become uber focused, put their blinders on, and overlook other suspects that could have been picked up? Is the suspect or suspect still alive in this case? That's what we're hoping to learn more about from our friends over at HBO Max.
I got my own profile on this. I will give that up in a longer segment on our premium content. I hate to keep saying that, but I'm I'm trying to cool off right now.
So now the cold case has been reopened, even though Austin PD says they have continued to pursue leads using new forensic tools. And I will interrupt your subscriber only content because I have a suggestion for Austin PD if they haven't already taken it on a very powerful DNA tool that might be able to help them. And it's something that you and I have discussed in private before. This is something that we've never discussed on air.
I don't know where you're going with this one, so I'll be interested to hear it myself.
And, lost in all this, and this will be detailed in the documentary, but you've got victims' families that have dealt with this for decades. They need transparency in this case, and we need to find justice for these 4 girls.
Eliza's mom will never know that. She passed away in 2015, I believe, never knowing who killed her daughter.
I hope that as time has passed, the pain has become a little less for the families. I know they've been able to move forward with their life, but there are so many questions regarding the death of four girls. Someone had to have seen something, and I only hope that this documentary brings more answers than questions, but it's been so long. The documentaries and the work they do are unbelievably phenomenal.
I agree.
I just hope that there are answers within this documentary. I don't want to get to the end and not be disappointed,
But be
but
sitting where we are now, no closer.
right. I mean, there will definitely be new information, and we'll get a chance to view the documentary before the general public. I've already had that conversation with our friends over at HBO Max. We're going to get a chance to take a look at it, but I sincerely hope that there are a lot more answers, because this is so frustrating when it involves teenage girls.
I agree. I agree 100%.
We are going to take a quick break. Again, thank you to all of our new listeners from podcast.today. Um, we hope you enjoy the content. We hope you continue to subscribe to our premium subscriber only content. When we come back, beneath the gag, Brian Koberger and the Idaho student murders. We are back with episode 19, and now a brutal night in Idaho. Got a quiet college town, 4 students dead, and a suspect who has said nothing. Of course, we're talking about the Idaho student murders. November 13th, 2022, 4 University of Idaho students were stabbed to death.
We have Kaylee Gonsalves, Madison Mogan, Xana Kernodle, and Ethan Chapin all stabbed to death in their Moscow, Idaho home right off campus of the University of Idaho.
No signs of forced entry, and some of the roommates survived. This case has been in the national news. There have been multiple documentaries on this case. Um,
This one's really haunting.
from a criminology student to an accused killer, Brian Koberger was arrested for the Idaho student murders. He was a PhD student in criminology, arrested in December of 2022. The arrest was made in Pennsylvania. His father had helped him travel across country from Idaho back to Pennsylvania. They were actually stopped a couple of times on the way, but the information hadn't um, reached all of the law enforcement agencies
Mm-mm.
at that time.
And those traffic stops were like very minimal for like following too closely, something, you know, nothing extraordinary or well, extraordinary would be out of the ordinary. So,
But he was arrested in Pennsylvania. They extradited him to Idaho. They had tracked his white Hyundai Elantra, his cell data. That was a bizarre part of the case.
yeah, super bizarre. I
And
mean,
they had matched the DNA on the knife sheath
yeah, I think
with
that was
his.
found underneath Maddie's body, I believe. And I hate to say it, but had it not been for that, he might have literally gotten away with the perfect murder.
I think what was bizarre to me at that point is I know that some experts recommend that you search your own name every so often just to make sure that there's no false information, etc., out there. But to hear that Brian Koberger was not only Google searching his own name after the murders, but was also watching news clips about the Idaho student murders and even saving them to his phone.
That's very narcissistic.
Easily narcissistic. That's a bizarre behavior that I will just never, never understand.
Well, if you do, I'm going to be scared for my own life if you understand that.
So he had stalked the house at least 12 times prior to the murder. This is a guy, again, that was a PhD student in criminology, but from eyewitness accounts before the murder was very awkward, seemed to not only insert himself into conversations that he wasn't necessarily a part of,
It's just a
but
very socially awkward kind of guy.
well, but that's the thing is he also was putting forth this front that he was a ladies' man because he, for example, the pool party that he wasn't necessarily invited to. There's kind of some um, back and forth about whether he was invited to this
Or
pool party.
if it was like an open invitation kind of thing.
Yeah, he walked over and was talking to girls that in one documentary and one part of the footage we listened to were, I'm paraphrasing, but out of his league. And it was just kind of that awkward. He was very aloof, very. I keep saying awkward. I hate reusing that word, but that's the word that kept coming up about him. But yet he had some type of inner confidence to talk to girls that would be considered outside of his coverage area. Let's just say that.
Well, you know what was inside of his coverage area was that house in Moscow, based on all the cell phone data.
And I do have a theory that will be part of our subscriber only content on what eventually made him focus on the house. It's something that I have not heard discussed in the research that we've done, but I do feel like I have possibly a lead onto why he eventually focused on that house, and that will be
Hmm.
part of our subscriber only content.
I can't wait to hear it. Um,
So why are we here for 18 months? Silence, and now this case opens up. There was a sweeping gag order that kept filings, witness names, and procedural details all hidden, which I was for. I know, and I know that's not going to be a popular opinion. Let me just say, I don't want to seem like I'm doing two promos at once because I'm not. I'm going to tell you in our subscriber only content why I was in favor of the gag order, and it doesn't have anything to do with the tragedy that the families have endured. It doesn't have anything to do with the lawyers. It doesn't have anything to do with the judge or jury. It has to do with Brian Koberger. And that is the only reason that I was in favor of the gag order.
Huh.
And that will be a part of our subscriber only content because I have some very, very strong feelings on why I was in favor of the gag order.
I already see you getting a little unhinged over there. So I have not heard this either. So um, take my money.
So, July 17th, the Idaho Supreme Court lifted the gag order on this case. So, more information will come out, most likely, I do not expect any revelations on why Brian Koberger did this. And again, that will go into the subscriber only content because I not only was I in favor of the gag order, but I will tell you exactly why I was in favor of the gag order. And it has to do with Brian Koberger, and it has to do with the Idaho Supreme Court lifting this gag order. I
Okay.
don't think the information that I am going to talk about is going to be a part of the information that is going to be made uh, available to the public.
I'm interested to hear your theory. I'm also interested to hear theories of our listeners as well. So if they haven't, if they, if we don't see any of the comments, I'd like you to remind them where they can send us emails about that and everything, so we can have open discussions about that. The only person I know that I've ever heard speak about the murders as a witness is the DoorDash driver,
Mm-hmm.
and that was very limited. It wasn't like open context or anything. So with this gag order being lifted, I'm really interested to see who and what comes forward to speak about what they saw, what they know, anything like that.
And for our listeners, and especially our new listeners from podcast.today, our email is info at smithmediateamllc.com. We welcome any emails, good, bad, indifferent, cases that you want us to cover. We feel like we do a good job in responding, and we feel like we do a great job in taking in cases that need to be covered. So our email again is
No case is
info
too small, ever.
info
Sorry.
at smithmediateamllc.com. Now, the lifting of this gag order is going to allow journalists like us and also the public to access these, what I would call key case materials, and some of the transcripts. Um, and the victims' families, especially Kaylee's parents, had been very opposed to the secrecy. Now, again, I am not going head to head with Kaylee's family,
Nope.
and I may be
Nope.
completely off base on why I was in favor of the gag order, and I will stand on this podcast next week if I'm wrong, and say it to the masses. I have no problem doing that, but I do agree with Kaylee's parents that the secrecy was an issue in this case. But again, on our subscriber only content, I will tell you why I was in favor of the gag order. So the prosecution, in building its case, had some missing pieces. I don't think that we will ever know, and I hope we don't ever know. And I will say that with my chest out. I hope that we never find out what Koberger's motivation was in this murder. And I very rarely say that because I like to know the facts. I like to know what happened, why. That's one of the reasons why we started this
Who,
podcast.
what, when, where, why?
Exactly. That's why we started The Last Clue. But I'm going to tell you, if we can find the motive from someone else, I'm all for it. But again, I will talk more about that in our subscriber only content.
Again, you've got my interest peaked.
I will also talk about how I feel like he selected his victims. I think it comes down to one very simplistic thing that I haven't heard mentioned, but I do think after all of our research, which I used to have jet black hair before we started this research, and now I'm turning gray, but at least my hair's not turning loose at this point. Um, I do have a theory on how he selected this house, and it has to do with the house. Not necessarily the people, which I will drop that theory in there too, but I think it has to do with the house.
Okay.
Um,
I think I smell what you're stepping in.
um, I would like to hear more about the surviving roommate's testimony, the full story. We've heard bits and pieces from them, but it's been pretty quiet because of the gag order. I'd like to hear more from them and exactly what they experienced, what they saw, what they heard, what they think they saw, what they think they heard.
Those girls. Oh my God, those poor girls.
And is it possible that this is not the first crime that Brian Koberger has committed?
Oh. Hmm. I mean, rhetorical question?
I will bet that he was or will be suspected in another crime or crimes upcoming.
I have to agree. I don't foresee your very first crime being a quadruple murder, a breaking and entering and quadruple murder. This is many moving parts to this case. Can't be. It can't. It's not your first time stepping outside the law.
No. Our friends over at Dateline released a 90-minute documentary called The Idaho Student Murders, which is now streaming over on Peacock, which we love the people over at Peacock. They've been very good to us. We appreciate their willingness to open up
Partner with us a little.
a little. That that episode really got into the real life horror that I've been to Moscow, Idaho several times. I lived in Wyoming. At the time, I did make some travels to Idaho. I have been to Moscow. I've been to the University of Idaho. It's a nice town. It reminds me in a way of Laramie, Wyoming. It's a college town, but it's still quiet, if that makes sense. They get loud on Saturdays.
Oh well, we know how that goes around here.
Yeah. Um, and that documentary does a very good job of following the investigation into Brian Koberger. Um, but after watching it, I still did have some questions. And again, I will never question Dateline. I love Dateline. We watch Dateline quite a bit. We enjoy the content. I do not, as much as I would love to meet Keith Morrison in a friendly capacity, I do not want Keith Morrison showing up at our home.
Well, because only one of us would meet him.
Yeah, unexpectedly. I don't. I would love to. I would love to go to a convention where Keith Morrison is, where to get to meet the legends.
Is there a crime con?
Oh yes.
Okay.
I would love to meet the legend that is Keith Morrison. I have all the respect in the world for Keith Morrison. I do not want Keith Morrison showing up to my house.
Nope.
Or any of the other ones for that matter. But Keith Morrison's the GOAT. Let's just. I'm gonna plant my flag in the ground. I don't even think there's a Mount Rushmore.
There has to be, because you got to put Lester Holt on there.
Absolutely not. Lester Holt makes $18 million doing intros and outros for Dateline.
Goals.
Well, agreed. I'm not mad at him about the money. Anyway, we might include this in premium content. But that brings up a good question for our true crime fans, especially our new followers from podcast.today. Who is on your Mount Rushmore of true crime investigative reporters?
Oh, okay.
We might actually make that into a segment. If you want to email us, info@smithmediateamllc.com. we might make this into a listener poll if there's we get a lot of interaction, but if there's specifically a lot of interaction on this,
I like it.
okay, we
Y'all,
are
please
going
do this.
we are going to take one final break, and then we will be back with a quiet pond and a dark secret. We are back on the last clue, and now it's time for a death that shook Maine. We discussed this on our podcast last week, and I will be the first to admit, just like I said in the last segment, when I am wrong, and I was wrong. Details have come out in the death of Sunshine Stewart, better known as Sunny, 36, who was found dead on Crawford Pond in Warren, Maine last month.
Wasn't she 48?
Oh, she might have been. Maybe I need to adjust my glasses.
Yeah, well, I think you have mine on.
I'm so sorry to all of our listeners. That's embarrassing, but yes. We had mentioned in our previous podcast that this was possibly part of a serial killer that had terrorized that area in different states.
It's just a theory.
I believe 13
13
murders,
bodies.
13 bodies in the area. So Sunny's paddleboard was found adrift, no signs of drowning, and as we mentioned, her death sparked a widespread fear of a serial killer.
I'm standing on business with that.
Now, I'm not disputing that there's not a serial killer in the New England area. What I'm saying is I don't think that this one, with the new information,
I see.
I think this was a one-off, and this goes back to the theory I had about Missy Beavers, which is one of our prior podcasts. So if you enjoy the content on this segment of The Last Clue, please go back and check out our podcast on Missy Beavers, which was featured on podcast.today. I do have a theory about the Missy Beavers case, and it doesn't tie into this, but the result of the Sunny Stewart murder is similar to what I think happened to Missy Beavers.
And that still blows me away. It still blows me away. I think you're onto something.
The monster that killed Sunny Stewart, allegedly, wasn't who anyone expected. Police have arrested a 17-year-old boy and charged him with Stewart's murder this month in July.
Unfreaking believable.
He has reportedly had a connection to Stewart's family, which makes this segment even more difficult to stomach if it wasn't already. A lady just enjoying her life out on a paddleboard, and allegedly a 17-year-old does the unthinkable. At this time, police have not disclosed a motive or detailed the charges because of his age.
Yeah, give it a hot minute, and once those charges come to stick and he goes to court, and he will be charged and tried as an adult.
I believe you're right.
So his name will come out. Everything else is going to come out, but come on, man. 17 years old. You've ruined not only your life, but that of Sunny's and her family's. You have taken away everything, and you will never know what could have been for either of you.
He probably should get used to 1 hour a day outside, because that is most likely what he's going to get.
Doesn't even deserve that.
With 13 bodies found in 2024 alone, what is really happening in New England?
I don't know. There's in that rural area. I hate to call it rural, but I'm a big city kind of girl. Anyway, that's a very dense area to find that many bodies in just over a few months.
And of course, officials claim that there is no connection between Sunny Stewart's case and the other deaths from 2025. And I can see that when you've got an underage
Hmm.
suspect in custody. I don't think that a 17-year-old would necessarily be capable. We're in July of this year, and they found 13 bodies in that area. He would have to have some type of access to go from state to state to state.
Sure, and especially if he had connections to Sunny and her family. Um, so he could be excluded from that whole serial killer uh, theory. But you can't tell me that there's not also the possibility of a copycat or copycats, or that there isn't a serial killer out there. You don't know what you don't know.
I know this will shock you, but online speculation and some media attention has continued to fuel the fears of a serial predator in that area. Again, we don't believe that this case is connected, but there still are 13 bodies that
So
don't
far,
don't have answers.
you're absolutely correct. I am glad that there is one. There is one off the board. There's one family that's getting answers.
Law enforcement insists investigations are unrelated, but also they are not being very transparent. As a matter of fact, I have heard this described in several different places as limited transparency. And that's not a good look for local police, especially when you have the ability to utilize resources from state police and even national law enforcement, such as the FBI. I understand as local law enforcement that you want to handle your own cases, but you also have to look at the big picture. Do you want to continue using what you have, or do you want to utilize resources? If you're driving a 1987 Toyota Corolla and you've got a friend that has a 2025 Ferrari and says, "Hey, I can get you across country quicker and safer," don't you want to utilize that?
No, no, come on, why would you? Now, I understand the limited information that you might want to pose to the public to keep the integrity of the investigation, under wraps, so you're not giving out too much information for um, all intents and purposes. But um, from agency to agency, that can be shared information.
From Austin to Idaho to the coast of Maine, these stories are united by one thing: questions that are left unanswered. But maybe, just maybe, someone listening holds the last clue. As always, if you have any information about any of the cases that we've covered, any cases that you would like to see us cover, or general comments, questions, anything, please email us at info@smithmediateamllc.com.